Joy sat up on her little bed, wiped her face. She couldn't believe her dreams have come true. Just like that. Admission to the prestigious St Theresa all-girls boarding school is but a dream come true. Last section, none of the girls in the whole Lumpur district passed the entrance examination to the prestigious school. Joyce ran to her mother's room. The mail had arrived around 8 p.m. at night, and they hardly had enough of jubilation before everyone retired to bed. When the mail arrived at night, Joyce was the first to see it. Since a week ago, she had been anxious for the result of the entrance examination. Mommy, what of if I pass St. Theresa boarding school examination? Will I go? She had asked her mother. Yes, of course, you will go, came Mrs. Zobam's response. Joyce had always avoided her father's opinion concerning her desire to study at St. Theresa's. Cut your coat according to your material, Mr. Kachi had asserted. Why don't you go to Lompo Community School? Mr. Kachi asked. What is wrong with the school? He continued. But Papa, most girls from Lompo Community School hardly have opportunity to earn a scholarship to go to college. St. Theresa is a prestigious school. If you do well in such high school, you will easily have access to government scholarships. Mr. Kachi rubbed his hair, saying, I am making announcements of the rain. Ever before it comes, Mrs. Zobam had been solidly behind Joyce's ambition, only that yesterday she did not show much excitement. Joyce was the third child and only daughter of Mrs. Zobam. Mrs. Zobam was a good-to-go tailor for many in the community of Lumpo. Despite her skills, being a tailor in Lumpo community hardly pays much. Many in Lumpo usually see tailors as charity people. Joyce was in her mother's room first thing after she woke up. Good morning, Mom, she greeted. Good morning, my love, came Mrs. Zobam's response. Congratulations once again, greeted Mrs. Zobam. You have really made me proud. Joyce paused, then said, Thank you, Mom. I hope I've not created much burden for you by choosing St. Theresa. Both Joyce and Mrs. Zobam knew that both the school fees and expenses were beyond her mom's modest earning. But Mrs. Zobam's unyielding love for her only daughter, who dared to dream, was unsurmountable. There is always a place for those who dare to dream, Mrs. Zobam began. If I had had the chance to go to college, I wouldn't have been just another tailor in Limpo community. But how, Mom? How are we going to make it? Joyce asked with much concern. Though Mrs. Zobam knew the reality of the financial burden that lay ahead, but her passion to see her daughter's dream come true were far greater. Mrs. Zobam held her daughter's hand, looking into her eyes before she said, Joyce, I know that you're a bright and ambitious student with dreams as vast as the sky. You have excelled in your studies and your hard work had paid off. You have done your part, my dear. Now it's time for me to do my part. Joyce breathed a sign of relief, then hugged her mom in a tight, warm embrace. Thank you, Mom. I will never let you down. I promise. Mrs. Zobam immediately swung into action the next day. She went to all the schools in Dimpo district looking for contracts. As she entered each principal's office, she would introduce herself, saying, My name is Mrs. Zobam. I am a tailor. If you need someone who will sew your pupils' uniform, I'm always available. But most of the pupils make their uniform at the community market, came their immediate reply. Mrs. Zobam was, however, undeterred in her search for contracts. Finally, 3 days after an intense canvass round the school in Lumpo district, she was able to lift a bargain. If you can make the clothes cheaper than the markets make, maybe we can contract you to make for our students. Mrs. Zobam immediately swung into action, giving as much discounts as she could in order to have a little extra money from her contract. Sister Margaret, the Reverend Sister in charge of Limpo Primary School, was quite supportive. She gave her as much contract for school uniform as she could. Mrs. Obam took the extra work, sewing late into the night, her fingers often aching from long hours at the machine. The school section resumed 2 weeks before Joyce's arrival. Both Joyce and her mother, Mrs. Zobam, had prepared painstakingly for that day. Zobam made 3 extra day wears for her and some two extra uniform. She paid for all her fees and books. The extra money she had made from the contract went a long way. Then, with the rest of the money, she bought her few provisions, a pack of sugar, a tin of milk, and some beverages. Joyce was so happy. On the day of the arrival, she stood at the gate of the prestigious St Theresa boarding school, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and anxiety. There at the gate, she entered the security house, where she was promptly searched as per customs of St. Theresa's. This is to ensure that no student came to school with contraband. After the search, Sobam hugged her daughter tightly, bidding her goodbye as she walked through the grand entrance. See you on the visiting day, she said, as she fought back her tears. The excited Joyce walked through the grand entrance. She couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the sprawling campus with its manicured lawns and stately buildings. The school coordinator gave her a warm smile. Welcome, Joyce, to St. Theresa Prestigious Boarding School, the center of excellence. She looked through the lists on her hand. You are in the Evans hostel. Join me as I take you around. Joyce wondered at the environment. The few students whom she saw were so spotless. It looks like what she only saw on the movies. For a moment, she relished at the joy of being one of the few students in her district who had passed the entrance examination to St. Theresa's since its inception. Her thoughts were soon overshadowed by the whispers and giggles of her new classmates. Joyce had come with only a small box and a few provisions, a stark contrast to the overflowing trunks and bags her peers had brought. She could hear snippets of their conversation, mocking her for her scanty belongings. Did you see what she brought? Hardly anything, Muna sneered. Maybe she couldn't afford more, another girl, Abigail added. Joyce felt a lump form in her throat, but she put herself together and continued walking. She remembered her mother's words, You have done well for yourself by daring to dream high, and I'm truly proud of you. Always remember that is not where you start, but is where you are headed to that matters. Every step you take, no matter how small, brings you closer to your goals. You might not have the biggest of the provisions or the choicest things of life for the moment, but your resilience and hard work are your greatest assets. Back at Ivan's hostel, Joy soon settled in her corner. It was spotless, her bedspread pink and her pillows soft. She smiled to herself and then turned to greet the girls who were around. But she found each of them giggling. She couldn't find her voice again. For a moment, she felt a lump again, but summoned courage, almost the greatest courage she could muster, to say, Hi everyone, I'm Joyce from Lumpur district. Lumpur what? That must be Bush, replied Kate. Where is that place on the map? Asked Sonia as they busted out laughing. Joyce felt a pang of emotions wash over her. For a moment, tears was about dripping down her cheeks, but she shouted within her heart, Me, cry, never. She quickly regained her composure as she began to unpack her provisions into her locker. It was a little stack of provisions. Her cupboard was barely quarter full. Then almost spontaneously, the other girls began to open their cupboard, as though to tell her how full her cupboard ought to be. Almost immediately, the bell rang. It was time for prep. Joyce was happy. As the alarm beeped, all the girls should move over to the library for evening prep. She prayed she would meet a more friendly person at the study. Joyce rushed over to the study, choosing to ignore the taunts. She found solace in the library, where she could lose herself in books and escape the harsh reality of her situation. So this became a norm for Joyce, always away from the hostel because of her neighbor's bullying attitude. Joyce always remembers her mother's word and therefore chooses to ignore the bullies. Then the bullies' actions graduated to the crescendo. One day, they began to accuse her of stealing their provision. Look, my sugar is finished, Katie announced. Someone has stolen it, and it's nobody than Joyce, she screamed, pointing her fingers at Joyce. How can it be me? Replied Joyce. I'm always the first to leave this hostel for study, and always the last to come back, Joyce said in reply. But the girls in Joy's corner were vehement with the accusation. "It's you," they said. "Your sugar is finished since 2 weeks ago. How come you drink your tea at the cafeteria when your sugar is finished?" "The tea is sweet enough for me, and I can always drink it with no sugar," came Joy's response. But now she was in tears at the grave accusation of the girls at her corner. She quickly went to make a report to her hostel coordinator, Mrs. Akobi. Mrs. Akobi investigated the accusation, interrogating the students one by one. She found out that the accusation was without evidence. She called the girls, warning them to never wrongly accuse anyone again. "How can you girls accuse your mates of theft without any substantial evidence?" asked Mrs. Akobi. One day after the accusation incidents, Joyce was reading at the library, where she always loses herself in books to escape the harsh reality of her situation, when she met a girl called Blessing. "Hi, I'm Blessing," she said with a warm smile. "I notice you like reading. Mind if I join you?" Joyce was taken aback by the kindness in Blessing's voice. "Sure, I would like that," she replied, grateful for the friendly gesture. As weeks went by, Joyce and Blessing became close friends. Blessing introduced Joyce to her close friends, who welcomed her with open hands. They didn't care about the number of provisions she had. They valued her for her intelligence, kindness, and determination. Joy's confidence grew and she began to excel in her classes. Her teachers noticed her hard work and dedication as she quickly became one of the top students in her grade. 3 years had come to pass since Joy's enrollment in high school. Again, because of her resilience and hard work, she won a scholarship which took her to Canada to pursue her dreams. She soon graduated from college and became a very rich and well-known pharmacist. The girls from the rich homes who once ridiculed Joyce were at their grad reunion last year. "Look at that bush girl that came from Lumpo district. Look how much she had been transformed," said Muna. They began to see her in different lights. They realized that Joy's strength and resilience were qualities to be admired, not ridiculed. But what baffled the girls was what happened during the reunion of the old girls of St. Theresa's prestigious school. Over the past 6 months, there had been a notification on the school's old girls platform. The government wants to privatize some of the schools by selling it off to some private organizations. St. Theresa's prestigious school was among those to be privatized. The advert for the privatization of St. Theresa's has been on the platform for more than 6 months now. The school is to be sold for £500 million. Many of the old girls of St. Theresa's were rich and influential, but none could buy back the prestigious school, not at the price it was being sold. Circulars upon circulars have been passed out their forum, urging one of the old girls or a group of the old girls to buy out the school instead of a total stranger. Many at the old girls forum laughed at the offer. "There is no need to wait for one of us to buy it at that price. It's better the government sell it off to a stranger." Unknown to them that Joyce, the bush girl from Lumpo district, had already quietly begun to make arrangements towards the buying of the school. She sent her attorney, Barrister Kolade, who had already started tidying up the paperwork towards the purchase of the school. The annual meeting was to hold in the month of January, before the school's resumption. All of the old girls of St. Theresa's prestigious school turned up in their numbers at the Grand School Hall. The state government and some other top government officials were there to make the official handover to the new management of St. Theresa's prestigious school. Joyce had specially wanted to make the announcement a surprise. None except her closest friends, Blessing, Nonye, and Ada, knew about the current change in the school's management. On the day of the meeting, Chief Okeke, the incumbent governor, was ecstatic. Education needs to be privatized in order to give it the serious outlook it deserves. It is on this note that the government have officially sold the St. Theresa's prestigious school to someone capable, vision-driven, and well-deserving, in the person of Mrs. Joyce Obi. Oh, so finally they gave over the ownership of our dear prestigious school into the hands of a stranger. But as Joy stepped up the podium, many of the girls gasped. Some opened their mouths, while some of Joy's friends, who already had a hint, stood to give her a standing ovation. The rest joined, some being more surprised than the other. But no one was more surprised than Mrs. Katie.
The French teacher.
Who? Joyce, she gasped. She remembered all that happened some few years back. How the poor girl from Lumpo district arrived her corner on the first day at school, greeting them cheerfully. How they had been carried away by scanty provisions and baggages. How they had laughed at her, calling her a bush girl from Lumpo. How they had even accused her wrongly, labeling her a thief, when they found out that Mona's sugar was missing. Even after they found out she was innocent of the accusation, they never apologized to her. Was she dreaming? Only for her to wake up one morning, 7 years after, to discover that the same Joyce is her boss. As this thought raced through her mind, Joyce was on the podium, halfway, her maiden speech as the new owner of the St. Theresa's prestigious school. She overheard her praising her mother, who believed in her dreams and worked extra time with aching hands to see it come to pass. Dear viewers, hope you enjoyed this amazing tale. What are your takes on it? Please share with us and kindly subscribe as we load you with lots of amazing and educative tales at African Tales by Amanda.